Motherfucker. Woo! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. I'm your host, as always, Clint McLean. And this week's episode, we are going to start off by crying just a little bit because last week was one of the worst weeks we have had since the show started, and I really hate losing. I'm competitive. That's why I like things like poker. That's why I like gambling. That's why I like sports betting, and it just tears me apart to sit here and tell you that we went 1-6 for picks last week. So I already did a recap. I uploaded it on the YouTube page, so those of you that are tuning in for the podcast, I'll do a real quick recap of last week's fights and the picks. Not as in-depth as the one on YouTube. We'll try to keep it short for everybody who listened to that one, but then let's move on. We got to brush it off and get to the next card because this one's really exciting. So apparently I've made too many Canada sucks jokes in my life because Canada really came back to bite me in the ass. Juan Adams started our night off, and like I said multiple times, that was my absolutely favorite pick of the night was Juan Adams, and he just didn't get it done. I mean, I guess maybe those takedowns that Buller landed was really what tilted it, but if you look at the striking numbers, he landed double the significant strikes that Buller did. So honestly, sitting here from a gambling perspective, yes, we lost that match, we lost that bet, we lost the fight based on what the judges said, but based on the numbers, I'd say we got our money's worth. That fight very easily could have been scored for Juan Adams. We have all seen far, far worse fights being scored for the wrong guy. So we very easily could have won that fight. We just had judges in the seats that favored the wrestling, and that's okay. That's going to happen. We've talked about variance. We've talked about how variance will go your way and it will go against you. This week it went against us. That sucked, but it went against us. Kyle Nelson, on the other hand, plus 190. This is one where I'd say we got value out of that pick. When it's 1-1 going into the third round, that's exactly what you're looking for with a plus 190 underdog. If it's an even fight going into the third round where you just got to get to the judges' scorecards and you've got a chance to win that fight, that is why you bet those long shot dogs. So Kyle Nelson lost. It wasn't our most confident pick of the night, and he really stood a shot of winning it. He just unfortunately gassed out before the final bell and got choked out. So again, we got our money's worth on that one. I can't say that I regret that pick. I still like that pick. Same thing with Marc-Andre Barriault. We got value at plus 140. That fight went exactly the way that I said that it would. Sanchez came out strong. He looked good at the beginning. Barriault found the timing. He found the distance, and he poured it on in round 2. That could have been a 10-8 round. I really think Barriault could have ended the fight in round 2, and I wish he would have stepped on the gas just a little bit more because Sanchez came out in round 3 and he found a gear that he has never showed before. This is the reason that we made this bet, is that he has never showed a third round gear like he showed in that fight. So I didn't expect it to happen. Well, it did. The bright lights hit Marc-Andre Barriault. He wasn't able to stop the takedown in round 3. Unfortunately for us, we dropped that one. But again, we were 1-1 with the dog and the fighter that had all the momentum going into round 3. So I can't say I regret that one. Finally, we got on the board with our one and only winner, Walt Harris, getting it done in the first round and making it look easy. That's one that I did peg right from the get-go. His opponent was a complete fraud, so congratulations to Walt Harris. The Brad Katona fight, that's one where I may have overestimated Brad Katona. You know what? And actually, now that I say that, I don't think I overrated Katona so much as I underrated his opponent's wrestling. I thought that the wrestling was not quite as good as it was, and then I thought Brad would have a better time defending it and keeping that distance. So I'm not a big fan of the way that that one played out. I thought it would be a lot closer than it did, so if there was going to be a pick that I'd regret on the card, it would be that one and the next one, because Elias Theodorou, what was that? That was a terrible display, and he usually suckers people into playing his game. Brunson was having none of it, and Elias didn't know what to do when Brunson didn't want to play. He actually put a tweet out, which I really kind of respected and appreciated, is that Elias was saying that he had an off night, and he openly admitted that he looked like shit and that he needs to go back and work on stuff, which from a betting perspective, you gotta love when these guys can self-assess themselves that way. That makes us, look forward to seeing them the next time and potentially betting on them the next time, because he's very self-aware. He's a very cerebral and smart fighter. So it just depends on who his matchup is going to be, and the kind of changes that he makes, because honestly, the way he fought that fight, he could have won it. If he was striking crisper and cleaner in the second and third rounds, I think he wins. He was the one who was avoiding the damage. He was keeping the fight on the feet. He was sticking and moving. He was doing everything that we wanted him to. He was just throwing these weird pitter-pattery girl strikes instead of real strikes. So if he had thrown some straights, if he had thrown some hooks, instead of the weird standing girl slap hammer fist thing that he was doing, I think we actually still could have won that fight. So not a fan of how that one turned out, but sometimes these fighters show up and they just don't got it, and it's unfortunate that he did that to us on this particular night. Then we go on to the main event, and man, Cerrone, how does this guy keep doing this to me? Every single time I fade Cerrone, he makes me look stupid. I can't pick that guy correctly. Every time I'm on him, that's when he shits the bed and I lose. And every time I'm against him, he shows up looking like a beast. I'll be honest, Al Iaquinta looked fantastic. He started that fight off great. He had the pressure. He hurt Cerrone several times, and it just looked like Cerrone wasn't able to get himself into the fight. I really thought Al was going to end it by round 3 the way that it was going. So I can't even say that I regret my pick on Al, because I think all the thought process was there. All the effort was there. Again, Cerrone dug deep, and he showed us that he is, in fact, championship caliber, and he turned it on and was able to flip the script on Al Iaquinta. And you know what? It went the full 5, and that's just because of how freaking tough Al Iaquinta is. So if we're going to say that that was a bad bet, I can't agree with that. Al Iaquinta was hanging in there and showing his toughness from bell to bell. And that's what you want when you're going to bet on a fighter. When they are willing to put their health and their safety on the line to get that one knockout punch because they know they can, that's who you want to bet on. That's when you're going to make your money. So it didn't pan out for us, but Al was a guy that was worthy of our dollars on last week's fight card. So again, a disappointing 1-6, minus 5.32 units, but we've got to look at this from the positive spin, and that's the 2019 record is 55-42. We are still over 30 units. The record is plus 33.42 units since the show started, so we can't really cry on our beer too much. Bad nights happen. And as you all know, every single time we have a bad night, we bounce back freaking hard. UFC Rio is stacked, and I'm ready to kill this card. Let's go. I'll be honest with all of you, this card starts off with a couple fights we're not overly interested in. The ladies fight to kick the night off. Both these ladies are very young in their careers. We're going to have to watch them and keep an eye on them. I don't have a good read on either one of them. So the second fight of the night is Hani Barcelos, and he's facing UFC newcomer Carlos Houchen, I believe. Houchen is how you pronounce that. Well, Ronnie is a beast, all right? He's 13-1-0. He was supposed to be fighting Said Nurmagomedov, who's the, I think, relative and training partner of the champion Khabib Nurmagomedov. Jeez, that's hard to say when you haven't practiced for a while. Anyway, Said was supposed to be in this fight, and that was basically a pick'em. That was going to be one hell of a fight, but unfortunately, Said had to drop out. It got canceled. Carlos is stepping in on short notice, and he is stepping right into the deep end of this division. Hani is no joke. And right now, unfortunately, that means that this line is way out of whack. We can't get anywhere near touching this thing because Hani is a massive favorite. Hani's in the ballpark of minus 550, and that's just redonkulous. We're not getting anywhere near that because the alternative is that this Carlos kid is the unknown best thing we've never seen in the world and shows up and wrecks him and puts everybody on notice. We don't know enough about him to actually take that underdog stab, and we also don't feel comfortable fading him because we really don't know who he is, and I do think that Hani's going to just wreck him and make him look like an idiot for stepping up this way. So he's probably going to take a big L on the big show, but the UFC will throw him a bone, and maybe in his next fight we'll have a better idea of how to play him. About the only thing that I would even get close to looking at is Barcelos wins inside the distance, and that's still minus 180, so giant gamble on an unknown fighter. We are completely off of this one. So the next fight is one that I actually have stared at for a long time. We've got Warley Alves, 12-3-0 against Sergio Moraes, 14-4-1. And this one is fun because both of these guys are Brazilian. And since we are in Brazil, I will warn you all, this is just like Russia. There will be home cooking. This happens constantly. Fighters get robbed in Brazil because they favor the hometown. It's a thing. It happens. As the good prophet Dominic Toretto once said,
"Your mistake? Thinking you're in America. You're a long way from home. This is Brazil."
Remember that bet we had on Thiago Alves plus 380 or something crazy like that to win by decision? Yeah, the reason we cashed that was because he was in Brazil. Anyway, Warley Alves, he's a really solid striker. He's 3-2 in his last 5, and he's been against some tough competition. He fought Kamaru Usman, Brian Barberena, James Krause. The other two guys that he did beat were kind of no names though, so every time he steps up to that higher level, he just seems to be underperforming, and he's been a massive favorite every single time out because he does have a ridiculous skill set. He did submit Colby Covington. It was kind of a fluky choke, but he also beat Alan Jouban. A lot of people think that was a questionable decision, so his whole record is just kind of marred and spotted by things that maybe just kind of don't make sense. Sergio Moraes on the other side of this has looked kind of like a monster. He did drop a decision to Anthony Rocco Martin. He's the one guy on planet Earth that got knocked out by Kamaru freaking Usman, who doesn't knock out anybody. So both of these guys have super high ceilings, but at the same time, they both have really questionable things that have happened to them. Whether it's their fault, whether it's crazy circumstances, I'm not sure, but they both have major question marks next to them. I personally lean to Warley Alves. When I first looked at this fight, I'm breaking it down. I think Warley Alves is going to be the better striker. I think he's going to be the bigger, stronger fighter in there. And if Sergio Moraes can't get it to the ground, I don't think that he can win this fight. And a lot of the way he gets fights to the ground is actually by clipping people and then taking advantage of that. So granted, that could happen, but I do think that Warley Alves is going to be the better one on the feet and be able to avoid that situation. So, unfortunately, again, this is just going to be a pass situation, but Warley Alves sitting around minus 145, I think that's right. I think that he is the favorite, and he should be. I know a lot of people that are betting Sergio Moraes as the underdog, and they really think he's going to choke him out, but I don't really subscribe to that. I'm very curious to watch this fight, and I'm very close to pulling the trigger on Warley Alves, but I am going to pass because there are just too many question marks. And with that, we are on to the preliminary card. We are running straight headlong into a dumpster fire. BJ Penn is returning once again to face Clay the Carpenter Guida, and I just do not want to see BJ fight anymore. I'm so done with this. This guy, he should have been cut off a long time ago. Once one of the shining gold standards of MMA is now 16-13-2 because he refuses to stop fighting. And because people will always tune in to watch him, he is currently on a 6-fight losing streak, with the last 4 of those, 3 of the last 4 of those coming by finish. This guy just doesn't have it anymore. It's so sad to say, but he just doesn't have it anymore. He fought John Fitch to a draw back in 2011. That's the best result he's had. He KO'd Matt Hughes back in 2010 after dropping 2 decisions back-to-back to Frankie Edgar, but that's been his only win since 2010. And somehow he is still fighting in the UFC. We could once say that BJ Penn was the best at just about everything. We could say that his striking was amazing. We could say his jiu-jitsu was amazing. His wrestling, his takedown defense, they were all on point. But it's not like that anymore. We can't even say any of the skills that he has right now are any good. So I've got a real hard time analyzing him as a fighter right now, just because he hasn't shown anything. He's been basically incompetent for the last 5-6 years running. So Clay Guida comes in here, and he's one of these guys with a never-ending gas tank. He's a good, solid wrestler. He will smother you, and he's got very awkward, herky-jerky, strange movements, and he manages to throw some heat behind those movements. He fought Joe Lozon back in 2017 and clipped him and KO'd him in the first round. So if that shows you what he's capable of, at this point, a broken shell of a BJ Penn probably can't take a whole lot of punishment from a guy even like Clay Guida, who's an aging fighter himself. Guida's 37 years old, and BJ Penn is 40. So this is really, we're getting into grandpa fighting territory here with the two of these guys going at it. Some fighters, like some of the other guys on this card, we will see are still more than capable at the ripe old age of 40. These two are probably not two of them. Now, Clay Guida, he's actually been kind of up and down. He's fading a little bit, but he's shown some good stuff. So I don't want to say that he's shot or he's done, because he probably could fight for another year or two against mid-level competition. BJ, on the other hand, needs to GTFO. So basically, if you want to parlay Clay Guida, he's minus 650. It's another one of those spots where, I mean, if it goes to a decision, maybe the judges rob Clay and give it to BJ or something like that. But I honestly see Clay Guida roughing BJ Penn up. I don't see BJ being able to keep up with him. If BJ gasses out even just a little bit, Clay's going to put him on his back and pound him out. But because Clay Guida is also getting older himself, he could grind out a decision here, and Guida inside the distance is minus 168. Guida by 3-round decision is plus 145. I would have a hard time picking between the two of them. This would be a fight where I would want to play the fighter straight because there's not enough value on either side of those lines for me to really feel comfortable with them. But obviously, we're not going to lay the minus 650. So gun to my head, if I've got to make a pick, I'll take Clay Guida inside the distance, but I'm not going to give that as official play because, like I said, it would not shock me if Guida wasn't able to put Penn away and he just grinds on him on top for the full 3 rounds. So have you had enough? Have you had enough of these breakdowns where I don't really give you anything solid to chomp on, especially after we're coming off a losing fight? Me too. I thought those were all just interesting enough to mention, and that way you've got my leans if you do want to put some extra juice on this thing and have a couple of extra fights to sweat. But finally, we are on to a legitimate pick of the night. We're going to run right into the lightweight division. Thiago Moises versus Kurt Holobaugh. Kurt Holobaugh is 17-6-0 facing Thiago Moises 13-3-0. And this fight is a fantastic young up-and-comers type of spot. Thiago Moises stepped into the UFC off of Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series after a TKO win, and he fought Beneil Dariush. That is a massive level of competition to start your career in the UFC at. Beneil Dariush is very, very well-rounded. So Thiago got ground out by Dariush for 3 rounds and lost a decision. Doesn't really surprise anybody when that's your first fight in the UFC and you're facing that level of competition. Let's flip on over to Kurt Holobaugh. Kurt came in after a very similar setup. He won his Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series. However, that got turned over to a no contest because he did use IVs to rehydrate after that fight, which those have been banned. They're illegal these days in the UFC. So he didn't really have like it wasn't like a drug pop. He didn't pop for performance enhancers or anything like that. It was the IV. It's illegal, but it wasn't like he was juicing. So I kind of don't really care about that. He won the fight. That's really what matters. So he gets into the UFC and he runs into Hani Barcelos. That's the guy from the very beginning of the card that we already talked about. Hani is a monster. And you know what? Kurt went 3 rounds with him. He got clipped in the 3rd round and KO'd, but that was a hell of a fight up until that point. They were trading. They were going at it. Kurt had some of the better of those matches, some of those striking engagements that they had. Kurt was really killing it. It was a very competitive and close fight. And with the ceiling that Ronnie Barcelos has got, the way we feel about him, he's sitting as a minus 600 favorite over another guy right now. And you're telling me Kurt Holobaugh stood toe-to-toe with him for almost a full 15 minutes? Man, for a KO loss, his stock rose from that one. That impresses me. He gets his next fight against Shane Burgos. Shane Burgos is the guy that fought last weekend, which realistically, maybe we should have put a bet on. He fought Cub Swanson and won a split decision over Cub, which questionable. But we didn't bet on it, so who cares? Shane Burgos is looking like a monster right now. He's 12-1-0 with his only loss coming to Calvin Kattar, who is also a monster. So his first 2 fights in the UFC's lightweight division, which by the way is the Cadillac of the UFC right now, it is the most stacked division possible, and I don't know where they keep finding these guys because it gets crazier and crazier every time they find one of these new prospects. So Kurt and Shane, they go at it. This fight ended at 2 minutes and 11 seconds of the first round. Kurt was whooping Shane's ass, and Shane is a very talented striker. He put a clinic on against Cub Swanson in their fight just last weekend, and Kurt busted him up. Kurt was well on his way to finishing that fight by TKO. He got a little over-aggressive, and Shane was able to lock up a real slick submission to end that thing, but he was completely rocked. And because of the way that he got finished, basically he's 0-2 in the UFC, and he's moving up a weight class here. He's gonna be seen as the guy that maybe doesn't belong. The line opened at plus 135, and I snagged it right away because I had my eye on this kid. It's down to about plus 110, plus 112. We can get plus 112 at Pinnacle, and we are going to lock that up because, in my opinion, the wrong guy is favored. Thiago's likely going to have a ground advantage over Kurt Holobaugh, but Kurt is actually a blue belt and a purple belt world champion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So even though he's not like a brown or a black belt, he's a highly impressive purple belt. And that's saying something. So if Thiago can't hit him hard enough to get him to the ground, I think Kurt's going to have the striking advantage here. So I don't see that happening. I think Kurt's explosive enough and he's got good enough wrestling defense to keep a guy like Thiago off him, who is not a natural or high caliber wrestler. I think this fight's going to stay on the feet. And if it stays on the feet, Kurt's volume and significant striking attempts are something ridiculous. I see Kurt KOing Thiago Moises here. I think the wrong guy is favored. People are trending that way. 98% of the money has come in on Kurt, and I completely agree. We're on it at plus 112. Next up, we've got an interesting fight in Ryan Spann versus Antonio Rogério Nogueira, better known as Little Nog. He's a Brazilian legend, and he has been around for freaking ever. The dude's 42 years old, 23-8, and he's facing Ryan Spann, who's 15-5-0. So this is another spot where I am super, super nervous about. Because of the week that we had last weekend, if there is a pick of mine that you're not going to jump on, this is probably the one. Antonio Rogério Nogueira basically has only gotten beaten by incredibly high-skilled, high-leveled power punchers and incredibly high-level power wrestlers. So you look back on his record, and even though he's older, he TKOs Sam Alvey, he TKOs Pat Cummins. So those are the mid-level opponents that he's faced, and he handled them as such. He lost by TKO to Ryan Bader, who's now the double champ over in Bellator, and basically he got mauled wrestling style in that fight. When it was on the feet, not a whole lot bad was really happening. It was all about the takedown. He had a back-and-forth war versus Mauricio Shogun Rua back in 2015 and lost a decision in that fight, but he had his moments and he had Shogun hurt a lot. Now, he got blasted in 44 seconds by Anthony Rumble Johnson, who's probably the hardest power puncher in UFC history, besides maybe Francis Ngannou. So you can't really say much about that one. And before that, I feel like we're getting a little too old in his career. But again, he beats a lot of good guys like Rashad Evans, Tito Ortiz back in the day, and then he lost to Phil Davis and Bader. So really the only guys who have been able to stop him have been wrestlers that have been able to control him on the ground. Ryan Spann is 15-5-0. He fought Luis Henrique de Silva Barbosa de Oliveira. He's that guy with 20 different names. He used to fight at heavyweight and dropped down to light heavyweight and basically went 0-3 in the UFC and got dropped. So as much as, yeah, he fought a bigger dude and he was able to get it done, he won a 3-round decision against a guy who really doesn't belong in the UFC. Before that, he won by submission via guillotine on Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series, and he got that done quick. That was his second time on the Contender Series. His first time on the Contender Series, he got KO'd by Carl Robertson in 15 seconds. Now, Carl Robertson is a guy who we believe has a very, very high ceiling. So after getting KO'd by Carl Robertson, he gets 3 finishes on the regional scene. 2 of those would be a first-round KO over, regional competition. What are you going to do about regional competition? Let's be honest. These guys they're kind of scrubs. They're probably not going to ever end up in the UFC. They've all gotten KO'd, TKO'd multiple times. So what does that really say about Ryan Spann? Ryan Spann is going to have a height and reach advantage. He's got the youth advantage. He's probably going to be he will be more explosive than Antonio Rogério Nogueira. However, if you're not a high-level wrestler, you are not taking Little Nog down. If you're not a power puncher, you're not going to KO Little Nog. I don't know if Ryan Spann's power translates in the UFC. He hasn't KO'd a world-class opponent, period. It hasn't happened. And the couple of times that he has beaten real solid high-level opponents, it's been by submission. Lil Nog is a legitimate black belt from Brazil. If this fight goes to the ground, Ryan Spann has a history of jumping guard and trying to jump on a guillotine choke. Lil Nog's not going to let that happen. You're not going to jump on Lil Nog's neck unless you are slick. And we're talking like Brian T. City Ortega slick, which Ryan Spann is not. I'm going to plug my nose and I'm going to bet Little Nog. That's right. I'm betting a 42-year-old fighter because I see holes in Ryan Spann's striking game. He's going to have the reach. He's going to have the length. But I also think that Lil Nog is going to be able to use that against him, and all Lil Nog needs is one shot to land on that chin. We've already seen that Ryan Spann can be knocked out. He was knocked out, like I said, in his first Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series fight in 15 seconds by short elbows. Carl Robertson is a beast. I will give you that. But Lil Nog just showed us that he still got his power by crushing Sam Alvey's skull. And just like I said he would, by the way, you're welcome, we cashed on that one. We're going to ride the hot hand here with Lil Nog. And like I said, this one does make me a little nervous. So if you're going to pass on a bet, this is probably the one to do it. He opened up at about plus 150, and it looks like the majority of bettors agree with me. 55% of the money has come in on Lil Nog because all it takes is one punch. And if this thing manages to get to the judges' scorecards, we're in Brazil. There's a little extra incentive sprinkled on the top of it that he might be able to scrape away a bit of a robbery decision here. So Lil Nog is the pick. 5 dimes is the best line. Plus 125. Let's lock up another dog play. Kicking off the main card, there's Francisco Trinaldo versus Carlos Diego Ferreira, and this is another one that I'm just going to have to give you guys a lean on. It's too close to call. Francisco Trinaldo is 23-6-0, and he is getting up there as far as the years go. He's also 40 years old, and he is Brazilian. Now, this is another one of those Brazil versus Brazil matchups, so it's not like we have to worry about a hometown robbery. Carlos Diego is 34 years old, and he is 15-2. So by all accounts, Carlos Diego is the better fighter. Francisco Trinaldo, however, has power on his side. So this is one of those fights where I think Carlos should be able to outclass Francisco, but I don't know that he's going to be able to get Francisco to the ground. Carlos's biggest asset in this fight would be his submission grappling, his Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I think he's better than Trinaldo is, but I think Trinaldo's the better wrestler. So I don't know if Carlos can get this fight to the ground to use that submission grappling. And while he is the striker that I prefer on the feet, I think he's slicker. I think he's got better technique. Francisco's got that one-shot power on his side, and I've seen Carlos Diego hurt several times. Kyle Nelson most recently in December rocked him hard in their first fight, which is mostly the reason we got on Kyle Nelson last time, is because of how good of a showing he had against Carlos Diego Ferreira. So I'm just going to steer clear of this one. I lean Carlos Diego Ferreira, but he is minus 160 at this point, and that is just a little too much juice for me to pay. You could play Ferreira wins inside the distance at plus 220, and I think there might be some value there. But again, Francisco is just so durable, and he's such a good wrestler. I don't know that the sub is going to manifest itself, and if the sub doesn't manifest, I don't know that he's getting knocked out. So all around, just a pass, because I don't want to lock myself into taking Ferreira by decision since he is such a dangerous finisher. That just seems like kind of a bad option. The next fight pits one of our favorite cash cows, Thiago Pitbull Alves, against Lerano Starpoli. And the reason I say it that way is because I heard his pronunciation. So that's actually how you say it, Starpoli. Anyway, Loreno is 8-1-0, and he is only in his second UFC fight. He had a 3-round decision win over Hector Aldana in his UFC debut back in November of 2018. Hector Aldana is 4-2-0. That's right, he has 6 fights to his name, and the last 2 of them are losses. In my opinion, he got brought in to face Kenan Song back in June of 2018. That was his shot to go, you know what, are you UFC level? Or maybe you're just a sacrificial lamb to make Song look good. So he loses, and you know what they're going to do? They're going to throw you a bone. They'll give you another young up-and-coming fighter to see if, you know what, maybe you can prove to us that you belong in the UFC. He faced Tripoli, and he lost that fight via 3-round decision. So you know what? He doesn't belong in the UFC. He fought 2 other young up-and-comers and lost to both of them. So he's got to go back to the drawing board a bit. So how much are we going to actually weigh on that for Strapoli's first UFC win? In my opinion, not a lot. We got to look at this kid's record, and that is the biggest issue that I've got with him. So his wins over Carlos Alberto Benzan Rojas. This dude is 8-6. He's barely over a 500 fighter. He is 8-6. He beat Sebastian Del Gallo, who is 1-2. That's right. He's got a losing MMA record with 3 MMA fights. And he then fought, let's see, what's this kid's name? Sebastian Munoz, okay? He defeated this kid by first round KO, and then he subbed him in the second round. That's right, he had 2 fights with him. Sebastian Munoz is 0-2 as an MMA fighter. His only 2 UFC fights are against Strapoli, and he lost them both. So this kid has a regional ass record. Oh yeah, Ezekiel Miranda, 0-1. 0-1. He has a 1 UFC fight, and that's against Strapoli. This kid has the most inflated record I have ever seen in MMA. It's god awful. So saying that he's going to step in here and face Thiago Alves, that is a massive, massive, massive step up in competition. His one win in the UFC, I don't think is UFC level. His 8-0 UFC experience, his 8-1 non-UFC experience doesn't show me that he belongs in the UFC whatsoever based on the level of his competition. I think Thiago murks him. I think Thiago's going to show this kid what it's like to fight at the UFC level. And Thiago at a pick'em price, honestly, is insulting. So we are going to roll with Thiago Alves. And I know I kind of jinxed us with my favorite pick of the card the last time I said that, so I do apologize. I'm going to roll those dice here again. This thing opened up as a pick'em, and it's still a pick'em. For some reason, people are not understanding the kind of kid that Strapoli is. And you know what? Maybe he will be the next big thing. Maybe he'll come in here and he's just going to wreck Thiago Alves and show me something that we've never seen before. But I highly doubt it. Based on the guys that he's fought, Thiago Alves has fought a level of competition so far above this. Even his last couple fights where he's lost decisions and his KO loss to Curtis Millender, fighting elderly legends like Carlos Condit, Jim Miller, and Patrick Cote, he's going to decision with those guys. Strapoli can't hold their jockstraps. I'm with Thiago Alves all day, and we can get him right now at minus 107. Thank your lucky stars for that price. If you're going to put 2 units on a play, that's the one I'd do it on. Thiago Alves at minus 107. That brings us to maybe the most interesting fight on the entire card for more than one reason. The legend, the king of Brazil, Jose Aldo, 28-4-0, is facing Alexander Volkanovski, who is 19-1-0. He's an absolute wrecking ball. And the reason this fight is so fun is because Aldo is knocking on the door to getting that title shot, to getting back on top. This is a title eliminator fight, ladies and gentlemen. If Alexander Volkanovski defeats Jose Aldo, he is obviously ready for the deep end of this division. If Jose Aldo beats Alexander Volkanovski, then he has proven himself to be the king, head and shoulders above everybody in the division except for champion Max Holloway, and they have no option but to give him that third fight with Max. And it's dripping with so much drama. I love this fight. I love everything about it. And the best part about the whole thing is I have a song bet riding on this fight. You heard that correctly. Me and my boy at UFC Bro Picks are head-to-head on this fight, and I have challenged him to a song bet. And what that means, for those of you who do not know, is that the loser of this fight has to sing at minimum 60 seconds of the winner of the bet's choice and upload it to Twitter. So the stakes are high in this fight. My pride is riding on this fight. I may be singing for you all come Sunday morning if this pick doesn't go our way. So I'm not sure if you want to tail me on this one. You might be cheering for me to lose so you can hear me sing something horribly embarrassing. I have no shame, so this is fun. Song bets may be the greatest thing ever invented. So digging into the fight here, let's start with Alexander Volkanovski. Like I said before, he is 19-1-0. He's been an absolute wrecking ball. He's got 6 UFC fights, and he's got 3 of those by stoppage. TKO in the second round, all 3 of them. 2 of his last fights coming over Chad Mendes and Derek Elkins. Spectacular performances, both of them. It's interesting to me that his last win against Chad Mendes is really the one catapulting here, because I have been describing him to my friends as Chad Mendes 2.0. I think he is a better version of Chad Mendes. He's got offensive grappling, he likes to pin his opponents up against the cage, and he's got bombs in those hands. He hits so hard, and he doesn't stop coming forward. He keeps the pressure on you 24/7, and he breaks you. That is his game plan, and that's why this is so interesting. Jose Aldo has a very similar style game plan. He doesn't use as much wrestling. It's very much more striking based, but he has a similar pressure style where his opponents tend to wilt underneath him. Both of these guys will just empty the tank. And that's been Jose Aldo's biggest weakness. Alexander Volkanovski can go hard for 3 rounds, no problem. So can Jose Aldo. Now, Jose Aldo tends to fade at the very end of the 3rd round, and that's where a lot of people think that Volkanovski is going to get the better of him. And that's how he lost the 2 fights to Max Holloway. Max Holloway's gas tank is second to none. And let's back up here for just a second. There have only been 2 men in the UFC that have been able to beat Jose Aldo. One of them is Conor McGregor, who starched him in 13 seconds of the very first round. The other one is Max Holloway, who beat him by outrunning him and TKOing him in the third round in almost identical fights back-to-back, solidifying that he is the rightful champion of this weight class. Now, just think about that for a second. Me personally, I've always wanted to see the Conor McGregor rematch because you can get a lot of variance when it comes to those quick, short, fast knockouts. So yes, we can say that Conor McGregor was at the peak of his game in 2015. He was the absolute man at that point in his career. So he starches Jose Aldo in 13 seconds. But we didn't actually get to see them fight. We didn't get to see them mix it up. We didn't get to see them skill for skill. And that's what I wanted to see. I wanted to watch the fight go longer. I wanted to know if Conor McGregor was the better guy or if he just got him that one night. I'm not calling it a lucky punch. I know there's a lot of Conor fans out there that are going to think this sounds bad on him. I'm a fan. I really think that he won fair and square that night. And it's like Daniel Cormier and Stipe. When you wreck somebody in the first round like that, it doesn't leave a whole lot of questions. But 13 seconds, the first punch that you throw, it leaves questions. In hindsight, it leaves questions. So Max Holloway took Jose Aldo for 3 rounds, both times. And basically, as soon as Max Holloway started to crank it up at the end of the third round, that's when Jose Aldo wilted. Max Holloway is the paper to Jose Aldo's rock. He is the guy who is designed to defeat Jose Aldo. I think they could fight 10 out of 10 times, and I think Holloway wins 10 out of 10 times. So we've got these two guys that beat the legend Jose Aldo. Is Alexander Volkanovski number 3? I don't think so. So let's look at the types here. Conor McGregor has a height and a reach advantage on Jose Aldo. He's a natural lightweight, and he crushes him with his KO power with a counter with perfect timing as Jose Aldo rushes in after being in a blind rage from doing all that media from Conor McGregor. And he clips him. All right, so Conor puts him out cold in the first round. Is Alexander Volkanovski capable of doing that? Well, he's got power. He's got power and he's got pressure. He's got good timing. But no, I don't think so. Every single time he's TKO'd anybody, it's been in the second round. It's been because in the UFC. On the regional scene, obviously, he took people out in the first round. But in the UFC, he's had to wear on guys. It's the pressure. He puts a pace on them, and they can't handle it. After a while, they wilt, and then he gets them with something big. So he's not going to get in there and starch Jose Aldo right away like that. Now, Max Holloway. He's even taller than Conor McGregor. He's got a height, he's got a reach advantage, and he's got a crazy cardio advantage. He's got a cardio advantage over almost everybody in the UFC, in my opinion. So Max Holloway is able to stay outside of Jose Aldo, make him work, make him miss, and really just make him punch himself out over the course of 3 rounds without taking any damage, or not a lot of damage. And then as soon as Jose Aldo takes a deep breath, he pours it on him until you can't get out from under him. That's how Max Holloway wins both of those fights back to back. Is that what Volkanovski is going to be able to do? Well, no, because he doesn't play the Matador. He's not going to stay on the outside of Jose Aldo's shots. He's not going to be able to reach in and counter and hit Jose Aldo where Jose can't hit him. He's not going to stand his ground in the center of the cage and trade like Max Holloway does until one of you takes a step backwards. He's going to try and push forward. So that strategy doesn't work either. And let's look at these body types. Both Max Holloway and Conor McGregor have a longer, lankier body type where they're going to have a reach advantage on Jose Aldo. Alexander Volkanovski is smaller than Jose Aldo. He is not going to have a height or a reach advantage. He's a much more compact fighter. So let's look at the guys who Jose Aldo has fought that look kind of like that. Now, while Jeremy Stephens is bigger and did have a height and reach advantage, he's very similar as far as being a compact body type. Then there's Frankie Edgar. Then there's Chad Mendes. Then there's Ricardo Lames. All of these guys have very, very similar body types, and they have, roughly on the top surface of things, similar fighting styles. Jose Aldo has beaten every single one of them. Most recently, Chad Mendes, he beat twice, and in the first time, he dropped him with a gorgeous knee that's on every single highlight reel they play of Jose Aldo. Jose knows how to handle pressure fighter wrestlers. That's what he's best at. Alexander Volkanovski is nothing new for Jose Aldo. He's going to come in here with his game plan. He's going to try to put the pressure on Jose Aldo. He may try to pin him up against the cage. He may try to take him down. He's not going to be successful in that. Jose Aldo is going to be able to shuck him off like he does everybody. He'll be able to defend the takedown and keep it standing. And if you don't have a reach advantage on Jose Aldo, if you're not able to strike him where he can't hit you back, you are not going to win that striking battle. And this is not a 5-round fight where Jose Aldo will not be able to manage his gas tank well enough and gas out in the later rounds. This is a 3-round fight. In Brazil, may I remind you. So if they have a 3-round war and it's a back and forth affair, this fight is going to Jose Aldo because he is the king of Rio. If this fight goes to decision, there's no way that he's losing it. So the only way that Jose Aldo loses this fight is by KO against a guy like Volkanovski. And I honestly don't believe that that's going to happen. Regardless of whether or not you agree with me, Volkanovski has one path to victory in this fight, whereas Jose Aldo has all of the other paths to victory laid out in front of him. Jose Aldo has been bet down, and we are going to thank everybody out there seeing the live dog money on Alexander Volkanovski, and in this case, we are going to disagree with the betting public. And we are going to be on Jose Aldo at minus 129. My wallet, my pride, and my singing voice are all going to be riding on Jose Aldo. Minus 129 to show us that he is probably the absolute best featherweight that we have ever seen, not named Max Holloway. Next up, we have the co-main event. Jared Cannonier faces Anderson the Spider Silva, yet another Brazilian legend, and this one is the fight that we never knew we wanted. So let's get into this here for a second. Jared Cannonier fought at heavyweight. He fought at heavyweight. He dropped down to 205, and now he's dropping all the way to 185. The dude is strong and massive. I honestly don't know how he makes 185. So his last time out, he TKO'd David Branch in round 2. Before that, he got KO'd by Dominic Reyes at 205, and he lost to a 5-round decision from Jan Blachowicz. He's been kind of hot and cold. He looked extremely impressive, but then for some reason also kind of not. He's got crushing power. He's got very good takedown defense, and all of his opponents have employed a wrestling-heavy kind of game plan against him. Well, that's obviously not what Silva's going to do. So he comes in here as the betting favorite over the legend Anderson Silva because you would expect that Anderson Silva is just not going to be what he used to be. We're going to ride with Anderson Silva as an underdog here. I don't understand how they can make this line the way it is besides maybe just the age factor. Anderson Silva is one of the best strikers we have ever seen. And Jared Cannonier has been facing guys who do not have anywhere near the striking credentials of a guy like Anderson Silva. And the one time he fought a solid striker in Dominic Reyes, he got KO'd. And Anderson Silva, if you recall, was able to move up to 205 and take out some of their top contenders without a problem. He also fought Daniel Cormier at 205 when Cormier was the light heavyweight champion, and Cormier was scared to strike with him, and Anderson came up on 2 weeks' notice. So I really am going to keep this one short and sweet. Anderson is a far better striker than Jared Cannonier. Cannonier might be able to mug him with one big shot, and short of that happening, Anderson should be able to school him over the course of 3 rounds and maybe even piece him apart until he's able to get a finish. Anderson Silva has the kind of takedown defense that someone like Jared Cannonier is not going to be able to get by. Cannonier is not a skillful, powerful wrestler like some of the guys that Anderson has faced, so I don't think he's going to be able to get him to the ground. He may be able to pin him up and clinch with him, but Anderson Silva is a master of the clinch. That wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. So if they're stuck striking, because we know Silva's not going to try and take Cannonier down, if this is a striking battle, Jared Cannonier is going to have to rely on one big punch. And Anderson Silva may have slowed down just a little bit, but Jared Cannonier is far and away not even close to some of the caliber of strikers that Anderson Silva has been facing lately. Israel Adesanya, hell no. Daniel Cormier, I think DC is a better striker than Cannonier is. Michael Bisping is absolutely a more technical striker than Cannonier is. Chris Weidman, Stephan Bonner, Yushin Okami, Vitor Belfort. Let's just go down the list. All of those guys are better strikers than Jared Cannonier is. I know I said I was going to keep this short, but I'm actually pretty amped up about it. Anderson the Spider Silva is in Brazil, and we're going to watch him win potentially his retirement fight in front of his home crowd. And on top of that, we're going to get underdog money. And if something should go wrong, we can always just throw the Brazilian judges a tip, and then we'll win a decision that way instead. So let's lock up Anderson the Spider Silva at plus 132 and thank the lines makers for this gift that they're giving us. Finally, we get to the main event of the evening, a women's fight of epic proportions. Thug Rose Namajunas is taking on the most dangerous contender in Jessica Andrade in Jessica's backyard. The champion usually gets to stay at home nice and comfy, and the challenger has to come to them. Rose is badass enough to say, not only will I accept the number one contender who most people are trying to run from, I'm going to go to her house and I'm going to beat her to keep my belt there. And you have got to respect that kind of intensity. Rose is on another level right now. She is far and away gotten rid of the problems that we saw of her earlier in her career. She is a mental rock. Physically and skill-wise, she always had the potential to be one of the best in the world, but the mental aspect was holding her back. And we really saw in those back-to-back fights in Joanna Jędrzejczyk that she was able to overcome her demons. She found a way to reach a place in her mind where she can ascend past those issues. And because of that, I really honestly think that Rose might be one of the best women's fighters we have ever seen. I know she's a strawweight. She fights at 115, so she's not going to stand as much of a chance against the bigger girls. But technically speaking, she really is like water. She absolutely flows with everything going on in a fight. If it hits the ground, she's got slick submissions and she's aggressive and can attack from there. She can wrestle and she can strike with the best out there. Joanna was the most decorated, maybe one of the best strikers we have ever seen in the UFC, let alone the women's division, the UFC period. Rose KO'd her in the first fight because Joanna underestimated her, and then Rose beat her pillar to post in the main event 5-rounder rematch, solidifying herself as the champion. Jessica Andrade is coming in here with a lot of heat, and I know she is a very, very dangerous fighter. A lot of people like her, but I really think we've got to be on Rose. How do you don't make the champion the underdog? You don't. The last time we saw that happen, Tyrone Woodley absolutely crushed Darren Till. I know this is a completely different matchup. Jessica Andrade is a powerful wrestler. She's going to come in and try and take Rose down, smother her, and she puts a beating on ladies when she puts them on their back. She is a complete monster. But I think Rose is going to be able to manage the distance. I think Rose is going to be able to come in with a game plan to avoid that situation. She's not going to end up on her back like a lot of ladies would have. And we haven't seen Rose in the octagon since April 7th of 2018. She is only 26 years old, and she's taking such a cerebral approach to the way that she does fights. I'll bet you she comes in improved. We've seen her better every single time she's stepped into the cage. And I don't expect that to stop because she is so young and so focused. I think Rose is the John Jones of the strawweight division. And I know that's got a lot of weight saying that because he's maybe the greatest MMA fighter we've ever seen of all time. But I think Rose is that for the women's. And I don't see her losing anytime soon. If anyone is going to beat Jessica Andrade, it's going to be Rose. And once again, we can get her at a dog price. We can get Rose Namajunas at plus 109 over at Pinnacle. We're going to ride with the champion and still Thug Rose Namajunas. So after a horrendous UFC Ottawa card, we are coming back to Brazil and we are riding with a lot of really close lines. We have so much line value this week. Kicking off our betting card, we're going to roll with Kurt Halaba plus 112. We're going to go back to the well with Little Nog at plus 125 to show this young upstart that he is not on the level of the Brazilian legend. We are going to roll with Thiago Alves at minus 107, Jose Aldo at minus 129. We are Team Brazil this week. Anderson Silva plus 132. And then we're going to cap it all off by rolling with the champion and still Thug Rose Namajunas at +109. We are going to witness greatness this week. We are going to dig ourselves out of that damn hole that I built for us last week. We are going to have a good week, and I want to thank you all for the outpouring of love that I received even after having a losing night. Thank you all so much for your support. Like, share, subscribe, throw me a 5-star rating over on iTunes. Help me get the word out about the show. Let's make everybody some money. Let's roll.